The Zolthar Dominion, an empire built on conquest, stretched its influence across 1,000 star systems. Their fleets were massive, their weapons unparalleled, and their reputation for annihilating those who dared oppose them was absolute. In the Grand War Room aboard the flagship Imperium, Zolthar generals gathered, planning their next great campaign. A small species on the edge of their territory had rebelled, and the Dominion had long since decided that their insurrection would be swiftly and decisively crushed. The Zolthar had dealt with rebellions before, and they had always emerged victorious. This would be no different. The species, barely capable of interstellar travel, had no hope against the might of the Dominion. The decision was simple: destroy their homeworld and extinguish any trace of resistance. In the midst of these preparations, the reports came in. A single human ship was approaching the system. At first, the generals didn't even consider it a serious threat. After all, humanity was barely known outside its corner of the galaxy, and even then, they were considered primitive compared to the advanced civilizations of the galaxy. One ship, no matter how advanced, would be nothing more than a nuisance. Send a scout ship to investigate, the Supreme Commander ordered, his voice dripping with indifference. This will be nothing more than a distraction. A few hours later, the scout ship returned with information that only piqued the general's amusement. The human ship, SS Valhalla, was a lone vessel, small, unremarkable, and, according to initial readings, poorly equipped compared to Dominion standards. The scout had attempted to engage, but the human ship had simply evaded every attack with agility that defied explanation. An evasive maneuver. The Supreme Commander laughed. What kind of ship could possibly avoid our fire with such precision? His second-in-command, General Vonner, narrowed his eyes. It's possible the ship has some unusual technology, but it's hardly worth concerning ourselves with. It will be easy to crush it before it reaches the core of our operations. The commanders all agreed, though their curiosity lingered. They had never encountered anything like this before, and it bothered them. It was rare for anything to challenge the Dominion so early in a conflict. However, they quickly pushed those thoughts aside. Humanity was still too small, too weak, to be a real threat. A single human ship, no matter how fast or evasive, could not challenge the might of the Dominion's fleet. The decision was made. They would continue with their plan. The full force of the Dominion fleet would descend upon the rebellious species, and the human ship would be dealt with swiftly along the way. There was no need to divert resources or send an elite task force. One ship, after all, could hardly pose any danger. But something about the human ship gnawed at the back of Vonner's mind. The humans were an unknown, a wild card in an otherwise predictable war. Still, he brushed it off. Deploy the fleet, he ordered. We've waited long enough. And so, the massive warships of the Dominion, each bristling with weapons of unimaginable power, set their course for the target. The humans would be wiped from the galaxy as easily as a foot brushing away a single ant. Or so they thought. The SS Valhalla was far from what the Zolthar had imagined. It was, in fact, far more than they had bargained for, but the Dominion was still unaware of just how badly they had underestimated humanity. As the fleet began its approach, the first sign that something was different came, something the Zolthar would not yet fully understand. The calm before the storm. The vast, cold expanse of space was broken by the appearance of a single human ship, the SS Valhalla. To the Zolthar Dominion, it seemed almost laughable at first. Against the backdrop of their enormous warships, the Valhalla was tiny, a mere speck. The human ship was sleek, its hull gleaming with an unearthly design that didn't quite match anything the Zolthar had encountered. It looked fragile, almost delicate. There was nothing about it that screamed threat. On the bridge of the Valhalla, Commander Jason Cole stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the approaching Dominion fleet. Despite the odds, he felt no fear. He had trained for moments like this. He had studied humanity's history of defying the impossible, of surviving when all hope seemed lost. The Zolthar thought they were facing an insignificant opponent, But Cole knew better. Humans had a way of showing their enemies just how wrong they could be. "Report," Cole said calmly, his voice steady as the crew moved around him. "All systems are operational, sir," Lieutenant Harris responded. "Shields are holding and weapons are primed. We're good to go." Cole nodded, his expression hardening. "Let's show them what humanity can do." Outside, the Dominion fleet was already making its move. Massive dreadnoughts, bristling with weapons, advanced toward the Valhalla like an unstoppable force, their engines lighting up the dark void. But the Valhalla didn't flinch. It was small, but that was its advantage. It could maneuver in ways the Zolthar ships could only dream of. "We're being targeted," Harris warned, his eyes flashing over the control panels. "Incoming fire." "Brace for impact," Cole ordered, his voice unwavering. He didn't have to give the order twice. His crew was ready. The ship's shields flared as the first barrage of Zolthar fire struck. The Valhalla shuddered but held firm, its shields absorbing the blast. The Zolthar had expected the human ship to fall apart under the force, but instead it danced around their attacks, using its small size to its advantage. "Return fire," Cole commanded. "Target their engines. We need to slow them down." The Valhalla fired with deadly accuracy, each shot striking the Zolthar ship's weak spots. One of the enemy dreadnoughts exploded in a violent burst of energy as its engine core was hit directly. The second ship veered off course, its systems faltering after a direct hit to its propulsion. The Zolthar commanders aboard their ships had never seen anything like this before. It was supposed to be a straightforward battle, but the humans were proving to be far more resilient than anticipated. "How are they doing this?" General Vanner demanded, his eyes narrowing as he watched the human ship's maneuvers. He could see it now. Something about the Valhalla wasn't like anything they had expected. The ship wasn't simply running away. It was outsmarting them. Its movements were precise, calculated, and faster than anything of its size should have been capable of. "We need to neutralize it now," Vanner growled, clenching his fists. "Focus all fire on that ship. Destroy it before it can escape." But even as the order was given, Cole remained calm. He had expected this response. The Zolthar had no idea what the Valhalla could do. They were used to brute force, to overwhelming numbers, but humans, they thrived on strategy and adaptability. They had learned to survive in ways other species never could have imagined. And right now, that was their greatest weapon. The Valhalla juked and swerved through the oncoming fire, narrowly avoiding a barrage of plasma blasts. The Zolthar's targeting systems struggled to lock on. Each attack they made only seemed to bring them closer to disaster. "Target their weapon systems. I want to disable their firepower," Cole ordered. With pinpoint precision, the Valhalla fired once more, hitting a Dominion vessel's weapons array. The ship's energy cannons sputtered and shut down. The humans were not only evading, they were systematically disabling the Zolthar's offensive capabilities. Each strike was a message. This wasn't a fight the Dominion could win by sheer firepower alone. The Zolthar might have the bigger ships, but the Valhalla had something far more dangerous, the mind of a human who knew how to use every advantage. As the first wave of attacks subsided, the Zolthar fleet began to regroup, but it was already too late. Commander Cole had thrown them off balance. And he wasn't done yet. The humans had arrived. And this was only the beginning. The Zolthar might have thought they were facing an army, but instead, they were about to learn that humanity could strike in ways no one expected. The battle between the SS Valhalla and the Zolthar Dominion fleet intensified as the human ship weaved and danced through the massive walls of enemy fire. The Zolthar had underestimated the humans, assuming their advanced weaponry and vast numbers would quickly crush the Valhalla. But what they failed to anticipate was the speed, precision, and ingenuity with which Commander Cole's ship fought back. "We've taken out another 2 ships, sir," Lieutenant Harris reported, his fingers flying across the control panels. "The Zolthar are losing their formation." Cole nodded, his eyes locked on the display as the battlefield unfolded before him. Its ship wasn't equipped to face such overwhelming firepower head-on, but that wasn't the plan. The Valhalla wasn't here to engage in a slugfest. It was here to outthink the enemy. Human ships were never the largest or most heavily armed, but they had something far more dangerous: adaptability. Cole issued a new command: focus fire on their command ships. We take out their leadership, and the rest will scatter. The Valhalla's weapons roared to life, and its cannons sent pinpoint shots to the heart of the Zolfar fleet. The shots ripped through shields and struck at vulnerable command vessels, causing chaos among the Zolfar's leaders. For the first time, doubt crept into the hearts of the Dominion commanders. Their tactical superiority was slipping away with each successful strike from the humans. General Vanner slammed his fist on the control panel. "This cannot be happening," he muttered, his sharp eyes scanning the tactical map. One ship is causing this much damage. "Should we call for reinforcements, sir?" one of his aides asked hesitantly. "No," Vanner snapped. "This human ship is just a nuisance. It can't possibly take down our entire fleet. Focus all firepower on it. We'll break it, like all the others." The Dominion fleet fired relentlessly, massive beams of energy lighting up the void. But the Valhalla was too fast. It twisted and turned, each movement calculated to avoid destruction. It wasn't just that the human ship was small and quick. It was also maneuvering with an elegance that baffled the Zolfar. They couldn't predict its path. "This ship, it's like it can read us," one Zolfar officer whispered, watching in disbelief as the Valhalla dodged a direct hit by a mere inch. "We need a better strategy," Vanner growled. "Send in the interceptors. We'll box it in." Moments later, smaller Zolfar craft, sleek, agile, and armed with razor-sharp energy beams, launched from the fleet, racing toward the Valhalla. Their goal was clear: close the gap, trap the human ship, and force it into submission. But Commander Cole had already predicted this move. "Deploy countermeasures," Cole ordered. The Valhalla's internal systems sprang to life. A cloud of smaller drones and high-powered jammers burst from the ship, creating a field of interference that scrambled the Zolfar ship's targeting systems. As the interceptors tried to lock onto the Valhalla, their systems malfunctioned. Some ships collided with each other, while others fired blindly into the void. In the chaos, the human ship launched a barrage of focused plasma shots, taking out two of the interceptors in quick succession. "Direct hit on their lead interceptor," Harris reported, his voice full of disbelief. "The Valhalla is taking them down one by one." "We're not done yet," Cole muttered, eyes focused on the screen. He could feel the tension rise, the pressure mounting. But he also knew that every second they spent in the fight was a second longer the Dominion would waste. They were not invincible, and soon the cracks would show. Meanwhile, the Zolfar fleet was faltering. Their coordination was slipping, and their once imposing firepower was no longer effective against the agility and tactics of the Valhalla. One of the larger Zolfar dreadnoughts tried to close in, but the Valhalla launched a calculated strike, disabling its engines. The ship drifted, helpless, as the human vessel sped away, leaving it in its wake. "We're hitting them harder than we expected, sir," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice filled with awe. "The Zolfar are falling apart." Cole's expression didn't change. "This is just the beginning." As the Dominion fleet scrambled to regain control, Cole's tactics were proving more than just effective. He wasn't just taking out their ships. He was breaking their morale, turning the tide in ways the Zolfar had never experienced. The Valhalla was showing them one simple truth: underestimating humanity was a mistake they would not live to forget. And as the battle raged on, the Zolfar commanders began to realize something that made their blood run cold. The humans were far from finished. The Zolfar fleet had been thrown into disarray. What was supposed to be a simple mop-up operation was turning into an embarrassing display of their military might, being slowly whittled away by one small human ship. Frustration and panic spread like wildfire among the Dominion commanders. We've lost another 3 ships, and the Valhalla is still evading our fire, General Vanner growled, his patience stretched thin. His sharp eyes scanned the battlefield. The once proud Zolthar armada was now a tangled mess of straggling ships, each trying to salvage what little dignity remained. "Prepare to deploy our ground forces," Vanner ordered, his voice a tight rasp. "We will end this with force. The humans can't fight on the ground." The Valhalla was proving difficult to catch, but the Zolthar were not foolish enough to think the ship was indestructible. If they couldn't break the human ship in space, they would take it from the surface. A fleet of Zolthar drop pods was readied for deployment, each filled with elite ground forces, warriors trained in the art of annihilation. Once they hit the ground, the Valhalla would be powerless. As the first wave of drop pods blasted toward the planet's surface, the Valhalla continued to outmaneuver the Zolthar fleet. Commander Cole watched the tactical screen carefully, knowing full well what was coming next. "They're sending in ground troops," Lieutenant Harris reported, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. "The pods are already entering the atmosphere. They'll land in less than 5 minutes." Cole's eyes narrowed. He had expected this. The Zolthar weren't going to let their pride slip away without a fight, but he had a plan of his own. "Prepare the defenses," Cole ordered. "Activate the planetary jammers and deploy the automated sentries. Let's give them a warm welcome." The Valhalla's crew moved with precision as they prepared the planet's surface for the coming assault. Automated defense turrets, buried beneath the planet's crust, activated and began to target the incoming Zolthar forces. The sentries, armed with pulse cannons and high-frequency disruptors, came online just as the first drop pods slammed into the ground. The Zolthar forces, skilled and ruthless, disembarked from their pods and spread out, scanning the terrain for their target. But the ground didn't yield the easy victory they had anticipated. The moment they set foot on the surface, the first pulse shots rang out, striking several of their soldiers down before they could react. "Ambush," one of the Zolthar commanders shouted, seeing his troops fall around him. The humans were waiting. This wasn't the battlefield they had prepared for. "Focus fire," another Zolthar officer ordered, but the ground was proving a nightmare. The automated sentries were everywhere, hidden in the terrain, concealed under rock and foliage. The Zolthar were no longer the hunters. They had become the prey. Meanwhile, Commander Cole was on the bridge, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "We need to keep them off balance. Activate the grav surge traps." The Valhalla had prepared several traps across the planet's surface, devices that used localized gravity shifts to disorient and destabilize any enemy who stepped too close. The Zolthar ground forces were no match for this. As soon as one group moved into a designated zone, the gravity surged, sending soldiers tumbling into the air, their equipment useless as they crashed down violently. The ground was becoming a maze of shifting gravity and explosive traps. The Zolthar, well trained in the art of combat, were now fighting against an enemy they couldn't see. The humans weren't relying on overwhelming force. They were using their wits. Each Zolthar soldier that fell didn't just represent another casualty. It was a blow to the invincible image the Dominion had carried for centuries. "How are the forces on the ground?" Cole asked, his voice low but filled with urgency. "Most of the first wave has been neutralized," Harris replied. "But they're sending in more troops. It won't be long before they adapt." Cole looked at the growing number of Zolthar troops still landing on the planet's surface. He needed to act quickly. "We can't let them regroup. Deploy the second wave of drones. Activate the EMP pulses." The Valhalla's remaining drones flew across the surface, sending out electromagnetic pulses that disabled much of the Zolthar's high-tech weaponry. For the first time, the Dominion's elite ground forces found themselves without their advanced tech, fighting in a battlefield that was slipping out of their control. Vanner, watching the chaos unfold, was now beyond frustrated. His forces had never encountered this level of resistance. A single ship, and now its crew was outsmarting and outclassing his best soldiers. "We'll crush them," he barked. But even he knew the truth. The Zolthar had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. The Valhalla was proving to be more than just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's ability to adapt and survive, no matter the odds. And the Zolthar were about to learn just how dangerous that could be. The battle on the surface had escalated into something far beyond what the Zolthar had anticipated. Their elite ground forces, who had once dominated entire worlds with ease, were now caught in a nightmarish landscape of shifting gravity, automated sentries, and unexpected traps. The Zolthar's pride was wounded, their soldiers thrown into disarray, and their carefully laid plans falling apart piece by piece. "Commander, they're regrouping," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice tight with concern. "The Zolthar forces are trying to reorganize on the eastern ridge. They're bringing in reinforcements." Cole's eyes remained fixed on the display in front of him. He knew this wasn't the time to relax. The first wave had been a victory, but the Zolthar were relentless. They would keep coming, adjusting, adapting. It was time to hit them hard again before they could solidify their position. "Set the secondary jammers in place," Cole ordered. "Activate the EMP mines along the ridge. Let's give them something to think about." The Valhalla's crew responded without hesitation. The automated mines, hidden beneath the surface, began to hum with power, charging to unleash another wave of disruption. The Zolthar had no idea what was coming. On the ground, the Zolthar were trying to establish a foothold. They'd taken losses, but their numbers were still overwhelming. A Zolthar squad commander stood in the midst of his troops, barking orders. They'd been using their advanced tech to counter the grav surge traps, but their weapons were still malfunctioning from the EMP pulses. "We'll take that ridge," the squad commander growled. "We need to take out those sentries before they cause any more damage. Push forward." The Zolthar soldiers surged forward, advancing through the dense foliage and broken terrain. They were focused on one thing, securing the area. But they hadn't accounted for the Valhalla's next move. The ground shook beneath their feet as the EMP mines went off, sending pulses of energy through the battlefield. Zolthar weapons sputtered and failed as entire squads of soldiers were disabled in a flash. The remaining soldiers, caught in the blast radius, fell to the ground in confusion, unable to fight back against the overwhelming surge of energy. "Good. Now move in," Cole ordered, his voice cold and measured. The Valhalla's secondary drones, equipped with pulse disruptors, swarmed the area. They descended from the skies like mechanical vultures, targeting vulnerable Zolthar soldiers and disabling their communications, rendering them unable to regroup. The Zolthar were being systematically dismantled from all sides. As the chaos unfolded, Cole couldn't afford to let up. He needed to keep the pressure on. "Deploy the infiltration teams. We'll finish this." A new set of drones, smaller and faster, were deployed into the midst of the disoriented Zolthar forces. These were equipped with specialized cloaking devices and silent weapons designed for close-quarters combat. Their mission was simple: disable key Zolthar commanders, and sow even more confusion. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Valhalla, Harris kept a close watch on the remaining Dominion ships still in orbit. "The fleet's beginning to retreat, Commander," he said, his voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. "They're pulling back. It looks like we're forcing them to rethink their strategy." Cole's lips twitched into a tight smile. "Good. They should be. Let's make sure they don't get any ideas about coming back." The Zolthar fleet, once so confident in its overwhelming power, was now in full retreat. The shock of losing so many ships and ground forces to a single human ship, one they had deemed insignificant, had shaken the very core of the Dominion's military strategy. They were being driven back, not just by the might of the Valhalla, but by something far more profound: the realization that they had underestimated the humans in ways they hadn't imagined. General Vanner stood on the command deck of the remaining dreadnought, his eyes scanning the chaotic battle unfolding beneath him. His fleet was falling apart, and despite his best efforts, the humans weren't giving them a chance to regroup. "This is impossible," Vanner muttered under his breath. "A single ship. How is this happening?" His second-in-command, a battle-hardened officer, looked at the display in disbelief. "They're exploiting every weakness in our fleet, General. They know our tactics better than we do." Vanner clenched his fists, the weight of their failing strategy settling in. "Prepare for full retreat. We need to regroup and reassess. We cannot continue this battle in our current state." As the Zolthar fleet turned and fled, Cole's voice echoed through the communication system. "Don't let them escape. We've come this far, and we won't let them retreat. Follow them." The Valhalla wasn't done yet. The humans had already proven themselves capable of more than the Zolthar had ever expected. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in the conflict, it was clear that the Zolthar were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. The Zolthar fleet, battered and disorganized, began its retreat. The once proud armada that had loomed in space, confident in its overwhelming firepower and numbers, was now fleeing from a single human ship. The Valhalla had turned the tide in a way no one could have predicted, and with every passing moment, the Zolthar fleet crumbled further under the pressure. On the bridge of the Valhalla, Commander Cole stood at the center, his mind sharp and focused. Despite the retreat, there was no room for complacency. The Zolthar might be running, but they wouldn't give up so easily. "Maintain pursuit," Cole ordered, his voice steady and unwavering. "We cannot allow them to regroup. They need to know that this battle ends here." Lieutenant Harris nodded, quickly relaying the command to the crew. The Valhalla's engines flared to life as the ship accelerated, its sleek form cutting through space with precision. The Dominion fleet had tried to escape, but the humans weren't finished yet. Every maneuver, every decision made had led to this moment, and Cole wasn't about to let it slip away. "Sir, the enemy ships are attempting to jump to FTL," Harris warned. "They're making a break for it. They know they can't outfight us anymore." Cole's eyes narrowed. The Zolthar would not simply slink away into the depths of space. They had to be stopped now. "Lock onto their lead ship," Cole said, his voice ice-cold. "Initiate counter-FTL measures. We cannot let them escape." The Valhalla's advanced targeting systems hummed with life as it locked onto the Zolthar flagship. The Zolthar ships had been designed for brute force, but their reliance on conventional tactics had made them predictable. Cole knew exactly where they would attempt to make their jump. "We've got a lock," Harris confirmed. "They're about to jump. We're in range." "Fire," Cole commanded. The Valhalla unleashed a barrage of electromagnetic pulses, sending a surge of energy that temporarily scrambled the Zolthar ship's FTL systems. It was a calculated risk, but it paid off. The flagship's drive sputtered and died, preventing it from escaping. "Direct hit on their FTL engines," Harris said, a hint of awe in his voice. "They're stuck. They won't be able to jump now." "We've got them," Cole said. He allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction, but he didn't let up. The Zolthar might have been trapped, but they were still dangerous. "Bring us closer. Prepare the boarding teams. We're going to finish this on their flagship." The Valhalla moved in swiftly, closing the distance between itself and the crippled Zolthar ship. The tension in the air was palpable, and on the bridge, every crew member knew the stakes. This was the moment where everything would change, one final push to end the conflict. "We've got visual contact," Harris reported. "The flagship is disabled, but they're still putting up some resistance. The crew is fighting back." Cole's face hardened. "Boarding teams, ready your weapons. We take the bridge. No prisoners." As the Valhalla drew alongside the Zolthar flagship, its boarding pods were launched with surgical precision. The pods slammed into the side of the enemy ship, cutting through its hull with explosive force. The Zolthar soldiers, desperate to defend their flagship, had no idea what was coming. The human boarding teams stormed onto the ship with brutal efficiency. Their weapons, precision tools designed for quick, decisive combat, cleared out Zolthar defenders in moments. The soldiers on the Zolthar ship, despite their strength and training, were no match for the human determination and speed. They had underestimated humanity at every turn, and now they were paying the price. Commander Cole led the charge, his team following close behind. They moved with military precision, clearing rooms and corridors as they made their way to the bridge. The Zolthar commanders, realizing they had no hope of winning, tried to rally their forces, but it was already too late. The Valhalla's team reached the bridge. The Zolthar commanders looked at the humans, their faces a mix of disbelief and fear. "You should have never come here," Cole said, his voice calm but filled with quiet fury. "This is where your empire ends." The Zolthar general, his pride shattered, drew a weapon in a last-ditch effort. But before he could fire, Cole was there, disarming him with swift efficiency. "This is over," Cole said. "Your fleet is broken. Your army is scattered. You have no way of winning this war." With the capture of the Zolthar flagship, the battle was won. The remaining Zolthar ships, now leaderless and demoralized, had no choice but to surrender or flee. Back on the Valhalla, the crew let out a collective breath. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time, they had proven that humanity could hold its own against the might of the Zolthar dominion. And the Zolthar would never forget it. With the Zolthar flagship captured and their forces in disarray, the remaining Dominion ships were no longer a true threat. The battle had shifted from a fight for survival to a pursuit of final victory. The Valhalla and its crew had done the unthinkable. They had broken the once imposing Zolthar fleet, and now the entire Dominion was on the brink of collapse. On the bridge of the Valhalla, Commander Cole stood tall, his expression a mix of focus and resolve. There was still work to be done, but the war was far from over. The Zolthar might have been broken for now, but their retreat was a temporary solution. They would need to press on if they wanted to ensure the threat was eradicated once and for all. "We've got full control of their flagship, Commander," Lieutenant Harris reported, his voice steady. "They've surrendered. The Zolthar fleet is scattered, and the remaining ships are pulling back to their last known positions." Cole nodded but didn't allow himself to relax. "Send a message to all remaining Zolthar ships. Their leaders are either captured or destroyed. If they wish to survive, they will surrender immediately. No more bloodshed." For a brief moment, there was silence on the bridge. Then Harris spoke again. "Message sent. The fleet is responding. They're pulling out. It looks like they're listening." Cole clenched his fists, trying to suppress the gnawing frustration that had built up in him since the beginning of the conflict. The Zolthar had underestimated humanity's determination, but now that they were finally backing down, he couldn't help but feel the weight of what had been lost. The casualties, the destruction. Their victory came at a high price. "Isolate the communication channels from their fleet," Cole instructed, his eyes scanning the reports coming in. "We need to be sure no surprises are left. No reinforcements will be able to rally if we can prevent them from calling for backup." "Understood, sir," Harris replied, quickly working to sever any remaining connections between the scattered Zolthar fleets. As Cole watched, the tactical map on the screen began to change, the pockets of Zolthar ships fading away into the blackness of space, retreating further with every passing moment. The Dominion had crumbled, but there was still one final task at hand: the Zolthar leadership. "We still have their high command to deal with," Cole said, his voice calm but firm. "We can't let the remaining leaders escape. If they get away, they'll rebuild. And that means we'll be back here fighting this war all over again." The Valhalla adjusted its trajectory, its course set for the heart of the Zolthar Empire, their homeworld. It wasn't a simple task. The Zolthar capital was heavily defended, and any human assault on their homeworld would undoubtedly be met with the fiercest resistance they could muster. But Cole knew that now was the time to finish this. The Dominion was vulnerable, scattered, and fractured. It wouldn't get another chance like this. They had to move quickly, decisively, before the Zolthar could regroup and mount a counterattack. "Prepare the fleet for a final strike," Cole ordered. "All ships, report readiness for a full-scale assault on Zolfar Prime. We're not letting them go into hiding. We take the fight to them now." The crew of the Valhalla was ready. They had fought and bled for this moment, and they were not about to let the Zolfar slip away. The time for mercy had passed. The Zolfar had started this war, and it was time to finish it. As the Valhalla and its fleet of allied ships made their final approach toward Zolfar Prime, Cole stood at the helm, feeling a surge of anticipation mixed with grim resolve. This was the culmination of everything they had fought for, and nothing would stop them now. The Zolfar might have been a powerful force, but they had underestimated the strength of humanity. And now, the entire galaxy would know the consequences of that mistake. As the Valhalla and its fleet of human ships closed in on Zolfar Prime, the atmosphere in the command center was thick with anticipation. The battle was nearly over, yet the final strike would be the most difficult of all. Zolfar Prime, the heart of the Dominion, was heavily fortified, surrounded by a vast array of defense platforms, weapon systems, and planetary shields. But Cole knew there was no turning back now. They had come too far to stop. "All ships in position, Commander," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice steady despite the enormity of what was about to unfold. "We have full battle readiness. The Zolfar are preparing their defenses. They know we're coming." Cole's eyes were fixed on the view screen, watching as the dark planet loomed ahead, its surface a sprawling mass of cities and military installations. The Zolfar homeworld had once seemed untouchable, a symbol of their dominance. But now it was their last hope, and humanity was determined to bring it down. "Activate all weapons systems," Cole ordered. "Engage the planetary shield disruptors. We'll take out their defenses before they have a chance to retaliate." The Valhalla's weapons systems hummed to life as its disruptors powered up. A massive beam of energy shot toward the planetary shield, striking with precision. The shields began to flicker, the once impenetrable barrier weakening under the concentrated assault. The Zolfar had prepared for an invasion, but they hadn't anticipated the ferocity of the human attack. "Planetary shields down to 30%, Harris reported. "We're through their outer defenses." "Good," Cole said. "Now, let's finish this." The Allied fleet surged forward, breaking through the final layers of Zolfar defense platforms. The Zolfar retaliated immediately, launching waves of fighter ships and heavy artillery from their surface defenses. Explosions lit up the dark sky as ships on both sides clashed in a brutal, chaotic dogfight. "Enemy fighters incoming," Harris called out. "We're going to have to fight through them to reach the surface." Cole's grip tightened on the console. He knew the Zolfar would throw everything they had into the defense of their homeworld. The fight for Zolfar Prime would be their last desperate stand. "Divert power to the forward shields and weapons," Cole commanded. "We'll push through their fighters. All fighters, engage." The Valhalla's weaponry opened up in a relentless barrage, cutting down the enemy fighters one by one. The ship's laser cannons and missile systems tore through the Zolfar lines, creating an opening in the enemy defenses. The Allied fleet followed suit, coordinating their attack to carve a path straight for the planet's surface. "We're almost there," Cole said, his voice resolute. "Prepare for planetary assault." With the shield down and the fighters scattered, the human fleet descended toward the surface, targeting key military installations and the Zolfar command center. The fate of the Dominion rested on this final strike. It was a delicate operation. Strike too hard, and the Zolfar would unleash their last reserves. Strike too soft, and they would rebuild. There could be no mistakes. The ground forces aboard the Valhalla were ready, their equipment and soldiers in position. As the fleet dropped into the atmosphere, the planet's surface came alive with anti-aircraft fire. But the Valhalla's shields held firm. The humans had prepared for this. "Deploy ground teams," Cole ordered. "We take the command center and end this war." The Valhalla's landing pods ejected, cutting through the atmosphere like arrows toward their target. The Zolfar command center, A towering fortress built into the planet's surface was heavily guarded, but it wasn't enough to stop the determined human assault. The ground team stormed the complex, cutting down Zolthar resistance with precision and overwhelming force. On the surface, explosions rocked the ground as human forces infiltrated the facility. The Zolthar soldiers fought fiercely, but their morale was shattered. They had been beaten in space, and now, on their own homeworld, they knew the inevitable was upon them. In the heart of the command center, General Vanner stood alone, his once proud fleet in shambles. His warriors were scattered, his empire collapsing. His eyes were fixed on the doors as they exploded inward, revealing Commander Cole and his team. "This is the end, Vanner," Cole said coldly. "You had the chance to end this. You chose war. Now it's time to answer for it." The Zolthar general glared, his weapon drawn in a final act of defiance. But before he could make a move, Cole's team had him subdued. The fight was over. Back on the Valhalla, the fleet celebrated their victory, but Cole knew the war had come at a steep cost. The Zolthar had been crushed, their empire destroyed, but the human cost was undeniable. As the remaining Zolthar ships surrendered, the crew of the Valhalla stood united. They had done what seemed impossible. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. And as they looked out over the ruined remains of the Dominion, they knew one thing for certain: humanity's place in the galaxy had been solidified.